Okay. I think it's recording.
Yeah, I
Okay.
got a notification that's recorded.
Okay. Then off we go.
Okay.
Who had the first slide?
Okay, so our presentation is about Finns culture. So the title of the article was called Do Finns Date Cultural Interpretations of Romantic Relating? So can you go to the next slide?
Yeah.
So the author of the article was Salia Putishian. I don't know how to say her name fully, but she attended the University of Helsinki in Finland. She's the director of the master's program in intercultural encounters. She's had over 29 publications, and she's also been the head of speech of communication since 2010 at the University of Helsinki. Okay, so for the first section of the article, it discussed abstract. So what exactly does abstract mean? So the definition of abstract is just a thought or an idea. It's not really physical. It's more of just like a concept in your head of thoughts that you've put together or something that has accumulated over time to build up into something. It's not something physical, can be seen, proven. It's just an idea, really. So, how does abstract connect to relationships? This is more relevant to the Finns culture, not necessarily American culture, because Finns culture really values silence and it's an important custom that they have. So, hanging out is commonly quiet, or being out is not really a loud thing. Talking isn't taboo, but it's not as normal as it is in our culture. So, for both American and Finnish cultures, dating is considered a cultural construct and a concept. This was proven by looking at the perception of relationships while comparing American women's interviews to the Finnish women's interviews. And in both cultures, we can see that there's different titles to show what romantic stages are referred to, such as seeing each other, dating, boyfriend, girlfriend, relationship, and how that works. So the author's main goal was to explain how early romantic relationships are different drastically when it comes to these two different cultures. And it's really important for Finns. Silence is really important for Finns. It's common in a natural way of being referred to as olla rauhassa, which literally translates to be left alone. So my discussion question for you guys is, have you ever been on a date? If so, was it clear that it was a date or it just felt like it was a date? And I think by this question, I just want to know what you consider a date, how you would like a date to go, how you know it's not a date, um, things of that sort. It could be a movie and dinner. That's like typically like the most cliche American version of a date. Something like that. In my opinion, a date can be almost anything. It doesn't have to necessarily always be romantic, but that's just my perspective. And now my partner will take it away with the slides.
Okay, so I'm going to discuss the method used in this study. The method refers to the strategies, processes, or techniques utilized in the collection of data or evidence for analysis in order to uncover new information or create a better understanding of a topic. So this was a qualitative study done through informant interviews of American and Finnish women to see how the early phases of romantic relating proceed and if there are cultural beliefs and values about romantic relating. Now, what I mean about it being a qualitative study is that it was a study not so much based on facts and numbers, but it was more interested in interpretations of data. So, American women from the ages of 24 to 31 were interviewed. 3 at the time were in a committed long-term romantic relationship, with 1 defining herself as single. All women had personal experiences of dating. 3 defined themselves as heterosexual. They were all from and living in the United States, and they all spoke American English. 2 were interviewed together, and 2 were interviewed individually. And the questions that were asked of the American women were: 1, do you date? Have you dated? 2, what is a date? 3, how do you know you are on a date? 4, what is dating? 5, what other terms are there for romantic relationships? And 6, what does it mean when someone says, I've decided not to date, I'm dating casually, or it wasn't really a date? And in contrast to the American women, 5 Finnish women ages 27 to 32 were interviewed. 2 at the time of interviewing were in a committed long-term romantic relationship. The other 3 were single. 4 defined themselves as heterosexual, and they all lived in the Helsinki area, but were born and raised in different parts of Finland, and they were all native speakers of Finnish. Now, in difference to the American women, the questions that were asked of them, translated from Finnish, were 1, how do you describe your current relationship status? 2, if someone asks you, are you with someone, what do you answer? 3, how did your relationship begin? 4, was it a typical beginning? How do relationships usually begin? What happens then? 5, how do you know if someone is interested in you? And 6, if you want to express that you are interested in someone, what do you do? Now, while I do think the method of study is very interesting to analyze and find evidence through several different sources, through questions and through conversation, I do think that this study could have been more consistent as far as having the same amount of women from each region be interviewed and under the same circumstances, to have been able to have the 2 sets of questions be more similar. Now, while I do understand the reasoning of the different questions being asked was due to the direct translation for the word dating being unavailable in Finnish, making the interview questions like about dating, casual dating, or serious dating close to impossible to translate for Finnish speakers, and it might not have made any sense for the interviewees. But still, it does make me wonder if the evidence found is adequately reliable or a valid representation of what American and Finnish women believe, considering the size of the groups interviewed, the differences in the questions that were asked, as well as the different circumstances in which the questions were posed. Now, on the section, what is a date? To help establish what a date is, the author partially uses the speaking mnemonic developed by linguistic Del Hymes to describe a date as a cultural communication event. Now, the S in speaking stands for the scene or the stage of communication. And when you are on a date, that scene is usually public. The P stands for the participants or dating partners. And dating partners go out on a date and they are alone together as a couple in a public place. The E stands for the ends or aims of goals of a date. And some goals include reducing uncertainty, having fun, or ultimately relational goals. And those goals are achieved by the A, actions. Actions are interactional and are expressions of interest and getting to know one another. And certain actions expected on a first date can include being open, being polite, and being focused on the date. And finally, the K, is the key or tone of the interaction. And the tone is usually relaxed, and the participants are or should be having fun on a date. The ing of the mnemonic were not used and left for future study, but the I stand for instrumentalities, aka the discussion channels. The N stood for the norms, and G for genre. Now, since we're unable to discuss this in person, I'd like to leave you with some questions to consider. 1 being, how do you personally define a date? And 2, do you agree or disagree with the speaking mnemonic as establishing what should be present on a date?
And now this is my part. Thank you, Daniel, and hello, class, if you're watching. But I'll be covering the cultural and belief values that was reported in this date. And the first one mentioned was choice. And now the women interviewed said that choice was very important to them, where there's choices before, during, and then after the date, where before they just have to choose if they want to start dating in the first place. hence why one of the quotes was putting herself out there. The second one was even agreeing to a date in the first place with another individual or romantic partner. And the third was while on a date, there's different choices being made based on past experiences, whether they're romantically involved with said person they are on a date, or if they even want to continue dating the same person or a different person entirely. Now, the second one also introduced was the active approach to actions, where it explained a person's method to get a date in the first place, where they had to exchange personal information with another said person to be on a date with each other. And so from the turns or the interviews statements from the women, it kind of seemed that American women more look this as a job or more work to, I guess, other nations, where they're saying that they spend time and energy and that they should take risk, referring to dating or more like a job in terms of the economic cost and then also the time used to even find a date in the first place. And also that a date is an active process where they have to go to events or places where they can maximize their chance of meeting new people to get a date. And then on the next slide, a requirement, the third one is a requirement for communication in the relationship. So what this means is that if there's enough personal information disclosed in the dates that they feel comfortable enough to continue the dates, where it is said that if communication is poor, insufficient, or the self-disclosure is not enough or unequally distributed, people view that as a date being unsuccessful, compared to where there's enough communication flowing freely that the date is going very well. And then the fourth option is that the right to pursue happiness, where I guess the community, where this community can be labeled as the US, where happiness is kind of recognized in only two ways, where an individual is married to the right person, and also when that individual connects with their group that he or she identifies with. And it could be argued that the ultimate the ultimate aim in dating is that once you find a date, you find it with a romantic partner that you connect with, that also leads to marriage, that will ultimately end up in happiness. And the question I guess I want to pose to the class is, out of the four discussed above from American women, which do you agree with the most, or which do you agree with the least? And now I'll pass it over to another group member.
Thanks, Hector. So for my section, we were analyzing the how do we talk about dating, specifically related to the Finnish perspective on dating. Finnish dating stages are more indirect than American dating styles, as the author observed. There's a stage called kattelu, which is also known as the observing stage, and it's a key stage of the dating process in Finnish culture, but requires no direct interaction between participants. Pretty much what happens is, as kind of shown in the picture here, the two participants observe each other from a distance and don't really acknowledge each other. They'll notice that they're both observing each other, but they don't even greet each other in the morning if they both happen to be on the same subway line. This leads to a process where a go-between helps initiate a series of interactions leading up to the initial date, as American would call it. This grants female partners and participants a greater sense of independence in this, because they aren't required to make direct interactions and can proceed at a pace they're comfortable with. This also allows both participants to focus on their positive face needs. Furthermore, by avoiding seeming too interested and being overly direct, especially in a culture that values silence so much, it helps minimize any power imbalances that could occur. And this, in their culture, is especially helpful because it prevents people getting hurt by rejection, because if you're not too eager, then you can't be hurt if the other person's not on the same level. And so the question I wanted to pose for the class was, how does prioritizing face maintenance as a relationship, as a part of early relational development, help form a better relationship? Because this has been in their culture for a while. And so I'm curious what your guys' thoughts are. and then I'll pass it off to Sarah. Sarah, you're muted.
Okay, for the discussion, obviously they're viewed from the two different, they're between the two different cultures. The study was only focused on women talk. So as for Finnish women, like they found it difficult to, the perception of communication, social relations, or personhood when it came to their dating life was different. So the phases, steps, and stages were different. Independency, where they found that independency is only highlighted in the Finnish women's discussion, and then the American highlighted that the face-to-face interaction and self-disclosure was what they valued. So as stated in the article, the early stages of romantic relating proceed differently, and that these cultural beliefs and values about romantic relating. So obviously there's a common difference amongst our intercultural environment. So my question to for this discussion, how would you describe to the class, how would you describe Finns and Americans' perception of dating as an interpretive and traditional perspective? So obviously to us, the Americans, it's traditional perspective, but how would you describe it in an interpretive perspective? So the conclusion, the term dating is a cultural and conceptual difference between individual and cultural meaning. The article implies that we can be so fixed on normal, structural, and structured tradition meaning that we forget about other cultural meanings. Dating is not universal. That's something we got out of this article. And we have different, stages, phases, as they stated. Perception of relationship and early stages of relating differs within cultural meaning. So overall, as I said, dating is not universal.
And that's it. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.